So I wanted to talk to you about kind of where you think the future of this movement is happening, right? Like you're not the first kind of public intellectual that has converted recently. And then there seems to be something in the air. I know you've been thinking a lot about just kind of what's happening now with the digital, like what's the phase shift that we're in all of a sudden, and is it
Right.
much bigger than people recognize? Any prediction on what's happening with what will be happening with the Christian movement?
Yeah. Well, in a conversation with John Vervaeke and Rick Henriquez, I coined the term practical eschatology. So I'm a practical eschatologist. So yes, I do have a prediction. Um, and this mirrors to the doomer optimism side of things quite beautifully, actually. So I nothing has changed in terms of my perspective that the assessment of the old-fashioned way of languaging of the game A, game B transition is very much at hand.
Yeah.
That the explosion of the digital in all the different aspects is continuing to unfold as foretold, and that the modern mind, to say the very least, is not vaguely equipped to handle the consequences of that at the psychological, ultimately then to the spiritual, or at the sociological and cultural level. And the unraveling of all the different characteristics of the modern world, the institutional structures, which now, what, like 90% of Americans recognize that effectively all institutions are utterly corrupt. And I mean corrupt not in the sense of completely captured, but both completely captured and completely ineffective and malignant in behavior. And this is true of all global institutions. Like, so the end of the institutional era is at hand. The context in which we are moving into is novel and singular in history. And this digital wave is exploding outwards at a light speed and consuming everything. Okay, so all of that is still, as far as I can tell, not just true, but increasingly confirmed by evidence. And so the squeeze is going to continue. The squeeze on trying to stay in the old ain't going to work. The old is definitely going away. And okay, what does it look like to move into something that is vaguely responsive to the world we're in? Now, this is the shift. The shift of, I will say, first person is somebody who's been very deeply involved in the investigation of that transition. That first you're going to move from the atheistic into something like the open secular. Then you're going to move from that into the spiritual. Then you're going to move from that into the religious. And then you're going to move from that into Christianity.
Okay, so I actually have I would like for you to talk through how you're thinking, like why Christianity and not like Buddhism or any other religion. I think for a lot of people they move from spirituality into like Buddhist meditation, and it's just there is, I think you said it in the Emerge interview. People are just highly allergic to Christianity. They'll go into any
Yeah.
religion and try to start taking all of that on before looking into their own, like the religion that's basically tied up with the whole West.
Lineage,
But
yeah.
yeah, curious, make the case why Christianity specifically.
Well, let's start with where we just the last part. So let's talk about the allergen piece because I think it's important. Certainly, I experienced it. Tim, did you experience that sense of allergy as
Oh
well?
yeah,
Yeah.
100%. I grew up in a little Protestant or a Pentecostal church. That was a little bit strange. It was a highly integrated church, like half black, half white. And there's dancing in the aisles, speaking in tongues, all that, and it was just strange to me. And then I had the Jim Rudd epiphany at 11, where I said this all can't be true, right? I'm like, well, if I was born in India, I believe that, right? So
Uh-huh. Yeah.
it's the last thing you want to go back and look at, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I also had a very strong aversion, like actual aversion to Christianity and all of its various artifacts. And I also, like many people, as I moved down this path, I never I never spent any time in the atheistic kind of pole because it's silly, but plenty of time in the agnostic pole and the secular material, not material, the secular physicalist agnostic pole. And as you cross that threshold into spirituality, the aversion that so many of us are living with. And by the way, the institutional Christianity in the United States and I guess in Europe didn't do a lot of favors. There's a lot of, how do I say, improper doctrine that people think is what Christianity is. And so they properly reverse to that because it's actually not right. It's a mistake or an error, or yeah, it's an error. It's a reaction, more specifically. So then you're like, okay, now what? So you start looking around, and in the '60s, '50s, and '60s, this Eastern stuff was novel. It was a novelty. It was new, and of course, our Westerns love new stuff just because it's new. Neophilics, and so we started exploring that. And there's two ways of talking about it from my point of view. One is the experience you had of Uruguay, in which I had both Ecuador and Kauai. Well, that's not my place.
Yeah.
And maybe if I were Japanese or Chinese or more Thai, maybe it'd probably be proper for me to sort of orient in that direction, but I'm not. Which means, just a very simple way of putting it, I'm not immersed in a context where all the different characteristics of it are fully super saturated in the environment that I'm in. You can't abstract a religion from its lived context and then pretend that you're living it. That ain't gonna work.
No, that's so true.
It's not how it works, but it actually is the whole lived context. You have to have all of those elements for it to be a vital thing. What you've done is you've just done the cut flower thing again. Like that C.S. Lewis cut flowers. If you take, Hinduism and you take Buddhism and you cut the flower, then you migrate it over and kind of like stick it in a vase in New York City. Yeah, you look kind of pretty for a little while, and then you look real sad because it's dead, because it's not alive anymore.
Right.
Okay, what does it look like to be plugging in? So first of all, if you're going to plug into a religion, plug into a religion that is alive, or at least can be alive. This is that kind of like seed versus plant. So Christianity in the West, Christianity in America is a sadly drooping plant. We're going to need to change out the soil, this root bound, move it get it out of a pot. Why has it been in a pot all this time? Let's put it back in the earth. I love that, the reconnecting with nature. That's the metaphor. Then we need to water it. Right? We need to give it proper sunlight. We need to kind of get the weeds out of there. So it's a care and feeding, though, but of a thing that is naturally part of an ecosystem. How funny, like, all the metaphors that can then grow back into that ecology. So that's how do I say it? At a theoretic level, that's the right way of engaging in this kind of thing. And so that starts making some distinctions. Now, if you're going to be, if you are Japanese, then maybe Zen Buddhism is for you, at least in this immediate term. Okay, now the second. The second is much deeper. I don't want to put a lot of stake on it because, again, I'm very new here. But as I have in fact spent time engaging with the world's religions, which I have, Christianity was the last, not the first. My intimacy with those religions is not super deep, so I don't want to speak too much out of turn. But as far as I can tell, Christianity, and in particular the characteristics of the Trinity, are in fact more correct.
And work, right?
And work in all the characteristics that you would need to get into. So that ends up being a bit of a tough pill, because now I'm saying, hey guys, if you do Buddhism, you're going to go somewhere, but you're not going to go all the way. And if you want to go all the way, you're going to have to come over here and interact with the Trinity, with the triune God. And that's a different kind of thing, and invites different responsibilities or requirements. And that's maybe a big, beautiful conversation. I don't think it's a conversation we need to have right now. Because what we need to have right now is let's get those who let's get the lived context alive, and let that aliveness, in many ways, just speak for itself. Like, that's the way of doing it. I'm happy to have an intellectual conversation about the Trinity with somebody who wants to have it. But the real answer is let's breathe life back into this, and then live it fully, and become disciples of Christ.